paralyzed millionaire was humiliated on the blind date, but he fell in love with the waitress who. Before we dive into this story, comment below and tell us which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Enjoy this amazing tale, only on Behind the Door. Let's get started. Marcus Chen sat in his wheelchair outside Le Belle Vie, one of the city's most upscale restaurants, taking deep breaths. His assistant had arranged this blind date, insisting it was time for him to open his heart again. 3 years had passed since the car accident that changed everything. 3 years since he'd gone from being a confident tech entrepreneur who closed million-dollar deals with a handshake, to a man who saw pity in every stranger's eyes. The woman walking toward him was stunning. Designer dress, perfect hair, heels that clicked against the pavement with authority, and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. This was Victoria, daughter of a business associate. Marcus straightened in his chair, adjusting his tie, hoping against hope that this evening might be different from the loneliness he'd grown accustomed to. Victoria's smile faltered the moment she saw him. Just for a second, but Marcus caught it. He'd become an expert at reading that micro-expression over the past 3 years. Surprise, disappointment, discomfort, all flashing across her face in less time than it took to blink. "Marcus," she asked, her voice suddenly tight, nothing like the warm tone he'd heard on their brief phone call 2 days earlier. "That's me. You must be Victoria. You look lovely. Shall we go inside?" The hostess, a young woman in a crisp black uniform, led them to a corner table near the window. Marcus maneuvered his wheelchair into position with practiced ease, noting how Victoria kept glancing around the restaurant, as if checking who might see her, who might recognize her sitting across from a man in a wheelchair. She placed her designer handbag on the table like a barrier between them. The waiter appeared moments later, a young woman with auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, kind brown eyes, and a genuine smile that reached all the way to her face, crinkling the corners of her eyes. "Good evening, I'm Sophie, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with some drinks, or would you like a few minutes to look over the menu?" "I'll have a glass of your Chardonnay," Victoria said, barely glancing up from her phone. "And for you, sir." Sophie looked directly at Marcus, not at his wheelchair, not with pity, just normal human kindness. "The same, thank you. And Sophie, could you recommend an appetizer? Everything looks incredible." Sophie's face lit up. "The seared scallops are phenomenal tonight. Chef just got them in this morning. They're served with a citrus beurre blanc that's absolutely divine." "Perfect. We'll start with that." As Sophie walked away, Marcus tried to engage Victoria in conversation. "So, my assistant mentioned you work in fashion. That must be exciting." She didn't look up from her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. Marcus tried again. "Have you been to this restaurant before? I've heard amazing things." "Yeah, a few times." Another buzz from her phone. Another message she immediately responded to. Sophie returned with their drinks and took their dinner order. Marcus couldn't help but notice the stark contrast. While Victoria treated him like an obligation, barely acknowledging his presence, Sophie made eye contact when she spoke, asked about his preferences with genuine interest, recommended dishes based on what he'd said he enjoyed. She was simply doing her job, but in that moment, her basic human decency felt like a gift. 20 minutes into the date, Victoria's phone rang. And instead of silencing it, instead of apologizing, she answered it right there at the table. "Oh my God, Jennifer, thank God you called," she said, her voice loud enough that the couple at the next table looked over. "Yes, I'm stuck at this dinner. No, you have no idea how awkward this is. I'm on a blind date with someone from Dad's business circle. No, you don't understand. They didn't tell me everything. He's in a wheelchair. Can you believe they didn't mention that? I feel totally ambushed right now." The restaurant seemed to go quiet, or maybe it was just Marcus's perception as his world narrowed to this moment of absolute humiliation. He felt every eye in the room turn toward them. His face burned. His hands gripped the arms of his wheelchair. Victoria kept talking, apparently oblivious to the scene she was creating, or perhaps simply not caring. I know, right? I mean, I consider myself a compassionate person, I donate to charity and everything, but this is not what I signed up for. How am I supposed to be seen with someone like that? My friends would never understand. It's just not fair to me. Someone like that. The words echoed in Marcus's head. Not a successful entrepreneur. Not a man who'd built a tech company from scratch. Not someone with thoughts, feelings, dreams. Just someone like that. Excuse me. Sophie appeared at the table, her voice still professional but with an edge of steel beneath the politeness. I'm sorry, but we ask that phone conversations be taken outside. You're disturbing other guests. Victoria finally looked up, annoyed at the interruption. I'm almost done. No, Sophie said, her tone leaving absolutely no room for argument. You need to step outside now or end the call. This is a restaurant, not a phone booth, and you're being incredibly disrespectful. Victoria's face flushed red, but whether from embarrassment or anger, Marcus couldn't tell. She huffed dramatically, grabbed her designer purse, and stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You know what? This entire evening is over anyway. I'm leaving. She looked at Marcus for the first time in what felt like hours, her lip curled slightly. No offense, Marcus, but this isn't going to work. I'm sure you understand. I mean, we're just not compatible. You need someone more suited to your situation. She walked out without another word, her heels clicking against the floor, leaving Marcus sitting there alone at a table set for two, feeling smaller and more worthless than he had in years. The humiliation washed over him in waves that threatened to drown him. Around him, he could hear whispers, feel the stares burning into him. Some pitying, some judgmental, all unbearable. He started to wheel himself away from the table, wanting nothing more than to disappear, when Sophie appeared again, carrying a plate. Please don't leave, she said softly, setting down the seared scallops he'd ordered. At least not on an empty stomach. These are too good to waste, and honestly, you deserve to enjoy something tonight after what you just went through. Marcus looked up at her, surprised. I should probably just go. Why? Because someone incredibly rude decided to show their true colors. That's on her, not you. Sophie pulled out Victoria's abandoned chair and sat down, breaking every rule of professional service. I have a 10-minute break coming up. Would you mind if I joined you? These scallops really are fantastic, and I'd hate for you to miss out because of someone who doesn't deserve another second of your thoughts. For the first time that evening, Marcus smiled. A real smile. I'd like that very much. Sophie's break turned into a conversation that lasted long after the scallops were gone. They talked about everything. Marcus learned that Sophie was working her way through nursing school, that she'd chosen this career after her younger brother had been in an accident similar to Marcus's but hadn't survived. She talked about wanting to help people, about seeing beyond diagnoses and disabilities to the humans underneath. Marcus found himself opening up in ways he hadn't since his accident. He told her about his company, about the fear he'd felt losing his mobility, about slowly rebuilding his confidence and his business, about the isolation that came from people seeing the wheelchair before they saw him. You know what I see? Sophie asked, leaning forward. I see a man who survived something devastating and came out the other side still building, still creating, still living. That takes more strength than walking ever could. When the restaurant began closing and Sophie's shift ended, Marcus didn't want the evening to end. Can I see you again? He asked. Maybe coffee, somewhere without blind dates and terrible people. Sophie grinned. I'd love that. But fair warning, I make terrible coffee at home, so we better go to a cafe. 3 months later, Marcus proposed to Sophie in that same restaurant, at that same table. The place where he'd experienced his worst humiliation had become the place where he'd found something real. Something beautiful. Someone who saw him, truly saw him, for exactly who he was. And Sophie said yes, proving that sometimes the worst moments in our lives are simply doorways to the best ones we've yet to experience. So what did you think of this story? Rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments below, and don't forget to tell us which city you're watching from. If you enjoyed this tale, hit that like button and subscribe to Behind the Door for more amazing stories. See you in the next one.